All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Hope that the Leadership Summit has been off to a good start for you all. My name is Michelle Roush. I'm the Assistant Director in Student Accountability and Restorative Practices. And today we are going to be talking about building community within your student organizations. So everything that I'm talking about today is from a restorative practices lens. So I'll be going over some different tools and techniques that we use in restorative practices that focus on building community. Now I am sharing my screen, and so I may not be able to easily see the chat feature. So if you have questions about anything that I'm talking about, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions throughout the presentation. If you message in the chat, I will be able to respond to those when I'm done sharing my screen. At the end, I'll leave a little bit of time for some questions and discussion. I would ask that during the presentation, if you are able to, unless you are actively, like asking a question, if you can keep yourself muted so that everybody is able to hear the session, that would be greatly appreciated as well.
Am I tripping? Is someone not muted?
Seems like maybe somebody is not muted. But I will see if we are able to get that taken care of. All right, everybody should be muted at this point, but you all should be able to, like I said, unmute if you have questions about anything. So for today's presentation, the things that we are going to be discussing, we're going to go over affective statements. These are referred to as I statements. I'll get into more of that at that part of the presentation. We're going to talk about fair processing and inclusive decision making, and talk about how you can incorporate your membership to make decisions so that they feel more part of your community within your organization. We'll talk about community agreements, what they are and how to use them as a community building tool. And then I will go into some information about how to do some community building circles and what those look like. I want to first start with affective statements. So like I said, some of you may have heard of these before. These are typically referred to as I statements. So, these are usually useful in everyday life. They are intended to be used in a way so that, whatever you are saying in the conversation is less judgmental, but it also allows people to be open with their feelings. So when we talk about using affective statements, there's typically 4 parts to a statement, an affective statement. So the first part is some type of like an observation. So when we think about, something that you are seeing or noticing or hearing, typically, you'll make it clear that the person is being seen and recognized. So I see this behavior, or I noticed this, or I hear you saying this, for example. The next thing you would do is communicate some type of a feeling. So you're having some type of an empathetic response to others and honesty in expressing your feelings. So this could be, I'm worried because, or I feel frustrated, or I feel disappointed. So you'll see kind of as we're building this affective statement, you're focusing on the I, you're focusing on what you are feeling, what you are observing. You are not shifting that language to say you to start the sentence. You're starting the sentence with I. The next thing you would do is communicate some type of a need. So you're saying what you need versus what a rule is or what a direction is. And you'll want to think about your values here and what values are determining your needs. So maybe, I value cooperation, or I need your help, or I value fairness. And then the last part of an affective statement is a plan or request versus a demand. So you want to state what you want here, not what you don't want. So in the future, would you be willing to do this? So to put this whole affective statement together, an example would be, I see you being a little bit more reserved when we are having this group discussion. I'm worried because I want to make sure that your perspective is taken into consideration when we figure out what we want to do for this event. I value your input and I want to hear your thoughts. In the future, would you be willing to share your opinion on the event that we are doing? So that's a very simple way to communicate to somebody in your organization who is maybe a little bit more shy or not sharing their opinion or feedback for an event. It does not only have to be used in situations where there's construct or kind of like the negative behaviors. You can also use it to recognize behaviors that you like to see in your membership. So maybe somebody is really excited and enthusiastic about being part of the executive board. So you could say, I see you putting a lot of effort into your role as the treasurer to make sure that all of our finances are in order. I feel appreciative that you are taking this role so seriously and that you are ensuring that we are set up for success. I value your commitment to our organization. Keep up the great work and, moving forward. That's saying, what they're doing is positive. You are appreciative of that and you are recognizing the behavior and you're telling them that you want them to continue doing those things. This, you may have seen before. It's called a feelings wheel. This is a really good tool to use with affective statements. In the middle, we'll see some of these, initial emotions or reactions. So we'll see like happy, surprised, bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, sad. And then as you move out into that second and outer ring, those feelings become a little bit more specific. So, you have your immediate reaction within the middle of the circle, but then as you expand out, those are the things that you may feel as a result of those immediate initial reactions to a situation. So, when you are thinking about affective statements and communicating about how things make you feel with your membership, it can typically be better to try to use those outer feelings as much as possible because those ones are a little bit more specific. They may more accurately reflect what you are actually experiencing because, as we can see here, if somebody says that they're feeling happy, that can mean a lot of different things. Same thing with angry. But maybe are you feeling betrayed? Are you feeling jealous or are you feeling annoyed? That's gonna more articulate what it is that you're experiencing and how something is impacting you. The next thing that I want to talk about is fair process and inclusive decision making. So when we think about fair process, it's asking us to consider who are our stakeholders in a situation, and how can we involve them in co-creating, this decision-making process. So it's important to clarify roles in decision-making. In this type of a situation, you're not abdicating your decision-making authority, and it's also not based on the popular vote or democracy. It is about, what are other people saying and how can you include their perspective in whatever it is that you are planning or doing to make sure that what, your student organization is set up for is also meeting, what the members are hoping to get out of the experience. So there's three components of fair process. The first would be engagement. So involving individuals in decisions that affect them by listening to their views and genuinely taking their opinions into account. This could be something, at the first meeting of the semester, asking everybody, what are you hoping to get out of, this student organization? Or what's one thing, one activity that you're hoping to do this year? You are then going to be, explaining the reasoning behind a decision to everyone who has been involved or who is affected by it. So after you ask them for their opinions, what is going to be that final decision? And then you also want to make sure that everybody understands the decision and what's expected of them in the future. So it provides some clarity in those situations as well. The one thing that I would want to say about inclusive decision making is to be mindful of how you are trying to include, different individuals' voices or perspectives in something. For example, I can think of one time, a student organization said that they were wanting to have their members submit a lot of different requests for songs that they were going to be singing. And then it was, difficult because they didn't want to not have somebody's example be taken into consideration for that final decision. So the one suggestion that I made is, okay, maybe you're narrowing the scope of what they are giving feedback for. So you can ask everybody to submit their initial thoughts, right? Everybody in your organization submit their thoughts or suggestions for what to do. And then maybe the executive board narrows those down to maybe like 5 to 7 options that the entire membership can vote on again. And then everybody, we go back to the meeting with everybody who is involved in the student organization and say, we appreciate you submitting your suggestions to us as a group. We've narrowed the possible options down to these 5 to 7, and now we want to hear from you all again about what this final decision is going to come to. And you can either, go based off of, a vote there, or you can get additional feedback from those individuals to be able to make a decision as an executive board. So you're taking their opinions into consideration. You're not abdicating that responsibility entirely. So you're not giving that control entirely to them, but you're just trying to figure out, okay, where can I make sure that their voice or their opinion is taken into consideration? So what I would say is, going into this upcoming academic year, if there are any spaces where you can solicit feedback or input or suggestions from your membership, do that. So that way you are actually doing things that they want to do, or doing things that they feel included or part of. That will allow them to buy into your organization a little bit more, and they'll feel like they are there for a purpose, and they're there doing the things that they want to do, not the things that somebody else is making the decision to do. The next thing I want to go over is community agreements. So for this, we're going to use the chat feature. Think back to your first meeting in the spring semester. What is one thing that you remember discussing or doing with your student organization? So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can take a look at the chat. But if you can recall back to that initial meeting of the spring semester, what are some things that you all did as a student organization?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so thinking back to that first meeting of the spring semester, what is one thing that you remember discussing or doing with your student organization? Okay, so I see having a picnic, making sure to clean up after your events, discussing roles and expectations, some introductions and icebreaker games, introductions again, painting rocks, discussing different events for the semester, talking about ways to get new members to feel included and welcomed. A fun high energy dance lesson that was easy to teach and learn, and an icebreaker game before you got started. Okay, so a lot of different things to maybe build community, make people feel comfortable with each other. Adam, I really appreciate you mentioning discussing roles and expectations, because that's what I'm about to get into right now. Somebody asked about a sign-in link that was sent. I will get to that at the end of the presentation, because I I'm not 100% sure what you are referring to, so we can kind of talk about that at the end of the session. But yeah, so a lot of different community building things that were mentioned here. So I want to spend a little bit more time talking about expectations and how you can do this with community agreements. So community agreements can be used to set expectations with one another. So, you know, this is expectations from members, from all members, for all members. Expectations from the executive board members to general membership, expectations from general membership to the executive board. You can use community agreements to set expectations for event planning. So thinking about how something is going to be done, who's going to be responsible for each role, what it is that you're going to be doing, where it is that it's going to take place, and when is the event actually going to happen. Community agreements can also be used to get feedback from your membership. So, you know, each student organization has a constitution or set of bylaws that they have to follow. And this kind of says like what your organization is supposed to do, kind of as a whole, like that's that overarching concept. But with community agreements, we're talking about the specifics of everything. So thinking about, you know, what is your expectation for your memberships? Are you expecting them to attend every meeting of the semester? Are you expecting them to communicate with you if they are not going to be able to make a meeting? Are you expecting them to give input and ideas, or are you expecting them to give feedback or take on different roles, or help out with, you know, the executive board? Do you have subcommittees? Those types of things. So the community agreements is essentially going to be a roadmap for you all to be able to make sure that there is clarity in what everybody should be doing, and that there is no miscommunication about what is happening within the organization. So I want to use the chat again. And if somebody is not comfortable using the chat or does not prefer to use the chat, you can unmute yourself as well. But thinking about, you know, giving and receiving feedback, what does that look like in your student organization? How do you get feedback from your membership? Okay, Jenna, so you said that you use Google Forms. Can you share a little bit more about some of the questions that you're asking on there, or what they would fill out on that?
Yeah, I just try to like get the basic information, like their name and their email. But I do ask them like what they think of the club so far, and what do they want to see changed. So they're just basic questions. Like the group I'm representing today, Brenda, this is from like another student group I was an executive member of. Like this is the first time. Like the group I'm representing now is one I just made this summer.
Okay. So getting feedback about things that they are enjoying, but also things that they want to maybe see changed or have done differently.
Yeah, or other things they want to be included.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about that. In the chat, I see a lot of people say that they have open discussion days for people to be able to speak their opinions, share thoughts and critiques, some leadership meetings. Polls seem to be a pretty big one as well. I like the idea of the Discord server to try to have everybody present to add their piece. And then I also see that somebody said that, you know, they didn't have a way to do this before. So they're implementing a feedback Google form at the end of the semester about their experience and what differences they want to see. So Google Forms can be a really good way to get feedback from people, you know, at their own time. especially if they're not able to attend a meeting. Sometimes Google Forms can be very limited because you may not be able to follow up with somebody right away to get more detailed answers, or if you're like wondering if like somebody can elaborate a little bit more. So if you're able to have those in-person conversations, sometimes you're able to hear a little bit more than what you might get on a Google form. It also allows for to be a little bit more of a conversation and dialogue and bounce ideas off of each other. But if a Google form is more convenient, that's absolutely an option as well. So coming back to the community agreements, we want to talk about, why are community agreements useful? So this provides, like I said, provides all parties an opportunity to be heard and have a say in what the group is talking about or planning for. There's also an opportunity to share a clear understanding of what needs to happen or is expected from everybody. And it creates opportunities for buy-in from the membership. So like I said, if you are asking people to share what they want to have happen, it is more likely that they will be more invested in the student organization than if they don't get the opportunity to have that input. So I think it's really great that you all are doing these things to have open discussions and seek input and feedback and things like that. You don't only have to do these things at the end of the semester, though. You can do them at a variety of points throughout the year to make sure that you're able to kind of benchmark, okay, at the start of the semester, people wanted to see these things happen. Maybe like a month in, okay, let's do a check-in. How is everybody feeling now? What's going well? What's not working? That gives you the opportunity to maybe make some adjustments to things, give people more opportunities, or if people are feeling pretty overwhelmed, maybe it's an opportunity to check in to realize, hey, you know what, I need to step back a little bit. We need somebody else to come in and do a little bit more. And then at the end of the semester, you may be able to get feedback on everything that you all have done. And then that will help you to prepare for the following semester after that. So let's talk a little bit about community circles next. So first and foremost, what is a community circle? So the primary goal of this is to establish trust and positive social bonds among a group of individuals. So this is typically some type of a format where someone facilitates one or more talking points for a group where connections, input, or experiences are shared to create trust, relationships, or bonding. You're really just trying to get to know one another. You're trying to be able to make connections, typically based off of shared experiences, soliciting feedback or giving people the opportunity to set expectations that may create some opportunities for trusts within the organization, and showing the general membership that you can trust the members of the executive board to be able to hear everybody's voices, to take into consideration what everybody wants to do, and to make their experience within that student organization a very positive opportunity and a very positive space. So when should you do community circles? Ultimately, you can do them at any point during the year, whatever makes the most sense for you all. But some really key times that you would want to do a community circle is during your first meeting of the semester. Everybody, you may have some people coming back who were part of the student organization last year, but you're going to also have a lot of new students as well. So it's a good opportunity for everybody to get to know each other. Also, coming back from summer, you may not have seen each other for a lot over the summer break. So it's a good opportunity to kind of check in. How are things going? Is there anything new that's been going on? How are we feeling about the start of the semester as well? You can also do community circles at the start and or the end of your meetings throughout the semester. So some people were mentioning that they would do some like icebreaker type things. You can do a community circle to do an icebreaker question. And then, everybody's answering the same question. You're able to, hear maybe some shared experiences among members within the group. And then the other time to do a community circle would be when new members join the organization. So whenever somebody new is coming and being part of the group, you want to make sure that they feel welcomed there and that they know at least the names of who everybody is. So doing some introductions, and formally welcoming them to the space could be really helpful to making them feel included and making them feel like, not just that there's somebody new who's showing up for the first time, but that you all actually really do appreciate and recognize them being in that space for the first time. So you may be wondering, how do I do a community circle? How do I facilitate this conversation? So the first thing that you would want to do is identify a facilitator for the circle. Who is going to be the person that is asking the questions or facilitating the conversation, leading the conversation? You want to decide in advance what questions and or talking points that you may want to ask. So if you're doing icebreakers, you may ask, what's your major? What is one thing that happened over the summer that you want to share with the group? If you're doing a circle focusing on expectations, what is one expectation you have of the executive board this semester? And then you would have that facilitator taking notes on what everybody has shared. So that person's going to need to be able to synthesize information, or at the very least, just take notes on what everybody is saying. The next thing that you would do is identify a talking piece. So in restorative practices, when we're sitting in circle, we want to use a talking piece to signify who within the circle essentially has the floor to speak freely and openly. A talking piece can be anything that is physically able to be passed around. So some examples would be something as simple as a little stress ball. It's easy for people to be able to fidget with if they're nervous. They can look down and be able to see the writing on it or feel the different dimensions to it. It could be something as simple as a little rubber duck, but it's something that I'm able to easily pass around. I can throw it across the room if I need to. I can walk it over to somebody who wants to be able to have the talking piece. But essentially, when I'm holding this object, I'm the person who is speaking at that point in time. When I'm holding the talking piece, it signifies that everybody else in that space has permission and is expected to be listening to what I have to say. Because in restorative practices and when we're building community, listening to one another is just as important as sharing your thoughts and opinions on something. So whenever you don't have the talking piece, it can be really difficult to not think about what you're going to say when it's your turn to talk. But we really encourage everybody to really take in everything else that everybody else is saying before you're thinking about how you're going to respond. And then when it comes time to actually do the circle, you'll have everybody sit in circle with one another. Typically, we're sitting in chairs, but you can sit on the floor, you can stand as well. Typically in restorative practices, we do not have a table in between us, so there's nothing in between me and the person who's sitting across from me. There's no barriers in between us in conversation. But if that's the way that the room is set up and you can't really arrange it any other way, you can do something like this at a table too. But the facilitator will ask one question or state a talking point at a time, and then pass the talking piece around for each member to have the opportunity to respond. You may be able to go around the circle multiple times for the same question if participants have something more that they want to share. But that doesn't always have to be the case. Sometimes you can do what we call popcorn, which means that you're going in a non-sequential round. So maybe I have the talking piece and I share my thought first, but then somebody 3 seats away from me has something that they want to share or provide feedback to. They could do that as well. Or maybe somebody on the other side of the circle sitting directly across from me has something that they want to say. We're not necessarily going one after the next, but we're going in a variety of different places. So at that point, that's really all of the content that I have right now. I do have some practice scenarios where we can do some examples of what it may look like to do community building circles. But does anybody have questions about anything that I've gone over today?
Cashmere sweater. I think it looks really good on blonde. It's extra large, so I wasn't sure about it, but I like the oversized fit.
Kara, are you unmuted because you had a question?
I have a question.
Sure.
So earlier you said like fair process isn't like a democracy. Like
Mhm.
how, what did you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so it means that we're not going off of popular vote. It's not a majority rules type of a thing. So with fair process, you're gathering different input from a variety of sources. And then you are taking all of that input, looking at all of it together and saying, okay, is it possible for me to be able to do what this person is asking, or hoping for? And if the answer is no, then you should be coming back to that space and saying, okay, I appreciate you submitting this feedback to me. I hear that this is something that you want to have happen. And we really wish that we'd be able to do that. Unfortunately, given budget restraints or something, whatever it is that isn't, you're not able to do that thing. We're not able to do this in the way that you are exactly hoping to do it. But we still want to try to see if we can find a way to do this idea where it doesn't cost any money. Or you're getting feedback from a lot of people, and maybe you can't do all of those things, but can you find commonalities in what people are making suggestions for? And then narrowing that down to a few more options to then have them vote. So, you're not necessarily taking what everybody wants and saying, yep, we're going to do every single thing on this list. But in places where you are able to get feedback, making sure that you are giving them the opportunity to do that, then actually following through on what it is that they are hoping for, if it's something within your capacity to do that.
Okay, but what if everyone has like completely different ideas?
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. So, again, like you're taking it into consideration. You're involving them in the process. So, say we have, I don't know, I'm just gonna make up a club, and if it's actually a club, that's gonna be wild, but a dog walking club. We need to make a decision on where we want to take the dogs for a walk this week. Somebody says that we should just do a walk around campus. Somebody else says that we should take them for a walk uptown. Somebody else says that we should take them on a walk down to Panera Bread on York Road. Okay, that's 3 different ideas of where we should take the dogs for a walk, right? So then we're going to bring those 3 ideas back to the group and say, hey, everybody, we have these 3 suggestions of where we should take dogs for a walk this week. We want to hear a little bit from you all about how you feel about each one of these examples. Some people may say, you know what, I really don't like the idea of going to Panera Bread. I don't know if that's the safest option. Maybe we should stay to being on campus because we can still move around a lot. We can keep them on a leash, and we know that the campus, there's not as much traffic as opposed to York Road. And then you're taking that into consideration, hearing, okay, you know what, some of our membership does not want to go down to Panera Bread. And maybe Panera Bread ends up being completely off of the table, and everybody's like, yeah, I don't really want to do Panera Bread. It doesn't seem like the best option. Now we've narrowed that down. We either stay on campus or we take them for a walk uptown. And then we're doing the same thing. Okay, let's have some feedback on these things. What makes the most sense? You're getting feedback from everybody there, and then you're coming back together as an executive board and hearing, okay, what is the feedback And how do people feel about going uptown? What is the feedback for staying on campus? What do we feel like is the best decision to make based off of the information that we have? And then you make the decision, say you make the decision to stay on campus to do the dog walking activity. You're coming back to your membership and saying, hey, everybody, we really appreciate all of the feedback that we've gotten for this next dog walking program. Based on, consideration and what we've heard from the different proposals, the executive board felt that it would make the most sense to do the dog walking program on campus this time. We want to make sure that everybody feels safe. We want to make sure that it's easily accessible. We want to make sure that we don't, run into too much going uptown. So we're going to stay on campus for right now. If we have opportunities to do things off campus in the future, we will do everything that we can to make sure that that happens. So you are showing to them, we took this into consideration. We considered the risks and the benefits with it. And based off of the feedback that we heard from the group as a whole, this is what we feel like makes the most sense to happen. So you may have a lot of different ideas from people, and that's going to be normal, especially if you have a much bigger group and you have a higher number within your membership of people who are showing up to events. But you still want to take their feedback into account. Just because you are asking them for their feedback, though, does not necessarily mean that you have to do everything that is being asked, because that may be unrealistic. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's like taking suggestions from everybody and then narrowing it down to what's feasible and what people would want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And if something is not feasible, then maybe it's like, okay, you know what? This is going to cost us $600 to do if we do it in the way that you suggested. We don't have $600 to spend. So is there a way that we can do this for a lesser cost or for no cost at all? So you're still taking their suggestion and finding a way to make it feasible and have it make the most sense for what your student organization is able to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions about anything from the presentation or how you might incorporate this within your organization? All right. Then I kind of want to move into a little bit of like a brainstorming with one another. So again, if you want to use the chat, you can use the chat. If you want to unmute and share, you can do that as well. But when you think about community building with your student organization, what do you feel has been the most successful for you all?
Can you say the question again?
Yeah, so when you think about community building with your student organization, what do you feel like has been the most successful for you?
Well, for me, I feel like making like a Discord server is pretty effective, because in a Discord server, you all have these little sub channels where people with certain interests can go and get certain information and can talk to each other there.
Okay. So easy means of communication and checking in with each other.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. I see a lot of people in the chat saying that they've tried to do some games, communicating with other leaders within the organization, optional hangouts outside of more serious club meetings. That can definitely be a much lower stress or low pressure way to get people to build community with each other and get to know one another. Somebody in the chat is actually looking for some suggestions. So they want to do a team bonding event, but they're not sure what to do. They don't want to just host a gathering and have people be bored. So what are some good ideas of what to do? Does anybody have anything that they would want to suggest as far as some team bonding that you all have done?
I can suggest some things that like my group has done. We've gone to like doing outside activities, so whether it be like roller skating or even things that are like in themed for that season. So for example, in October, we're planning to do like an escape room team bonding. So things like that have been really fun.
Thank you for sharing.
I know-
Um,
I would
Sorry.
like to add my piece, possible.
Go ahead.
Okay, so something one of my high school teachers said is that it's funny if you sit a bunch of strangers together, they won't talk, but however, if you put food in front of them, all of a sudden they do start talking. So have some snack present, have some homemade inserts, food, anything that's convenient, any
Mhm.
food that's just not bad. It helps to move the conversation along.
Okay.
If I can suggest some things too, I know last semester what my group did, because some of us live on campus and off campus, so it was harder to get together. So we did like we rented out like frisbees and like footballs from the rec center and then just like played in like the soccer field area. And then we also turned like some of our fundraising events like bake sales into a hangout where it's like we all got together, like bake together for a day. But
Okay. Sabrina is wondering, do you make participants pay out of their own pockets? So they're trying to be mindful of pricing people outside of team bonding that may deter people from attending.
It's for us at least, it's been a mix of the two. So sometimes it will be out of pocket, but then sometimes, depending on how many people and stuff, we have a lot of savings in our from our like fundraising and stuff that we're able to like alleviate that.
Okay. Sabrina, if you don't mind me asking, what student organization are you part of? Like, can you share a little bit about what you all do?
Yeah, so I'm part of BEA, which stands for Broadcast Education Association. And we get people who are in the EMF or mass comm majors or just interested in broadcasting and film production. We connect them with industry professionals to try and give them connections and a head up in their career because our industry is all about making connections.
Okay. So, maybe if you're an organization focused on making connections with one another, maybe you're doing some like get to know you type games, or activities. But also, if you are really looking for team bonding that that your members are going to want to participate in, maybe that's something that you're asking them for the first meeting of the semester is, hey, we really want to make sure that we are doing some bonding things outside of meetings that everybody's going to enjoy. Does anybody have suggestions for things? And then if you're worried about pricing people out of participating, you can also ask them, would you prefer to do things that are no cost, low cost, or is cost not like does cost not matter for you? That way you're able to gauge like, okay, whatever team bonding thing that we're going to be doing, we need to make sure that it is free for everybody, that there's no financial restriction at all. Just because you want to plan things doesn't mean that you have to plan it on your own. Your membership is there to also be active participants in the process. So really lean on them to try to get suggestions of things that they would actually be interested in. I think there are a lot of really good suggestions that people have mentioned, both audibly, but also in the chat. I'm seeing some things as well, such as retreats and conferences, Jackbox games, and extending the reservation times. There's also just been some conversation. It looks like Tiffany mentioned about acknowledging differences and how it can actually be beneficial to the organization. So, leveraging strengths of one another, and leveraging, different people's experiences to help make those connections as well could really be helpful to finding some natural opportunities to do some team bonding.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything that, they are, maybe have been struggling with or are hoping to get ideas from people that might be beneficial for their student organization? Okay, well then we are pretty much at time right now. So I do really appreciate all of the thoughts and feedback that you all gave in the chat. And for really just, giving your attention today to building community. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that if you are interested in having a restorative practices or community building workshop for your student organization, SARP does offer those, and we can set up a training for you all. So I wanted to just let you know that we do those. You can reach out to us at sarp@towson.edu. We also will have restorative practices workshop series as part of Tiger Stripes. So the events are posted on Involved at TU, and RSVP is required. Up to 2 members from a student organization can attend these. So we're going to have a session on community building, a session focusing on problem solving and decision making within your student organization, and then also a session on conflict resolution. So if you are finding that you're having some difficulty with your student organization, running into conflicts or just having a hard time, making decisions with one another, we're going to have some workshops focused on those things. So again, those are on Involved at TU. If you want something specific for your student organization, you can reach out to sarp@towson.edu as well. So that's all I have for you all right now. If you can please head back over to the main session for the closing and assessment, that would be really great. If you have questions, feel free to stick around for the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, you're good to go. So thank you all, and I hope you have a good start to your semester.
Thank you.